All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into one of humanity's oldest questions, but we're going to look at it from a completely different angle. What if the world wasn't created? What if it's just manifesting all the time? Let's get into it.
This is a question that's been bugging us forever. From ancient myths to the latest physics, we're obsessed with it. Where did all of this come from? And it feels so fundamental, right? I mean, if something's here, it had to have come from somewhere. Somebody or something must have kicked the whole thing off. Or did they?
But here's the twist. What if that's the wrong question entirely? See, we're used to looking for a source, a creator, a first cause, which, when you think about it, is all about control, right? A top-down plan. But the idea of manifestation, that flips the script. It's not about a creator, it's about a process. It's not about a single starting point, but about the underlying structure. And it's not about control from the top down, it's about things emerging from the bottom up.
All right, first up, a world without a maker. Let's really dig into this idea that for there to be order, someone has to be in charge.
So, the source material here argues that our hunt for a first cause isn't really a philosophical necessity. It's more of a psychological comfort blanket. I mean, think about it. If there's a creator, that means there's a plan. The universe isn't just random chaos. If there's a beginning, then that chaos has boundaries. It's a way for us to feel safe in a world that can feel pretty unpredictable.
And what's really fascinating is how two totally different ways of thinking, modern science and ancient philosophy, kind of land in the same spot. You look at modern physics, like Einstein's work. It's not asking who made the rules. It's totally focused on how the structure works. And then on the other hand, you have ancient Buddhist philosophy, which basically says the whole question is a delusion. It calls it a wrong question, something that just gets in the way of seeing reality for what it is.
Okay, so if there's no grand designer, no cosmic blueprint, how do we get all this incredible order we see around us? Well, the answer from physics is shockingly simple.
The whole foundation of modern physics rests on this one really stubborn idea called invariance. And the classic example, the big one, is the speed of light. It's like the universe's one non-negotiable rule. It doesn't matter how fast you're flying or where you're going, the speed of light is always the same. It's an absolute constant.
And this is where it gets wild. This one simple rule has enormous consequences. See, because the speed of light has to stay the same for everyone, everything else in the universe has to, well, bend to its will. Space-time can't be this rigid, fixed background anymore. It has to become flexible, relative. It has to stretch and shrink. And just from that one single, unshakable principle, the entire structure of our cosmos just unfolds. Things like time dilation, E equals mc squared, all of it, they aren't separate rules. They're just necessary consequences. The whole thing emerges on its own. No designer requires.
So that brings us to a really powerful question. If the entire universe, in all its mind-boggling complexity, can run without a central controller, why do you think you need one?
So how does that happen? How does one simple rule blossom into all the complexity we see? Well, there's an engine that drives it all.
And that engine is feedback. Basically, a feedback loop is just when the result of an action feeds back and influences the next action. It's this process that can take tiny differences and amplify them into massive organized structures. It's how systems learn to organize themselves.
I mean, just think about an ant colony. There's no CEO ant in a corner office sending out memos. There's no central brain telling a galaxy how to form. In these systems, order isn't commanded from the top down. It's allowed to emerge from the bottom up, just based on simple local rules.
Okay, so now for the really tricky part. Let's take this powerful idea, order emerging from feedback, and apply it to the one thing we feel we know best, ourself.
The feeling of being me. It's about as real as it gets, right? My thoughts, my feelings. But here's a crucial distinction from the source. Just because something feels real doesn't mean it's a solid, separate thing. Think about it. A rainbow feels very real, but it's not an object you can touch. A whirlpool in a river is definitely real, but it's not a thing. It's a pattern of moving water.
So what if the self is like that whirlpool, not a static object, but a stable pattern that's constantly being generated by a feedback loop? It could go something like this. You have an experience. Your memory labels it mine. That label strengthens your sense of I. And that stronger sense of I then shapes how you interpret your next experience, which then gets stored in memory, reinforcing the I again. And around it goes. The self isn't some fixed entity. It's the loop itself.
And here's the kicker.
According to this view, pain and suffering don't come from change itself. Change is just what happens. The suffering comes from trying to protect this fluid, dynamic pattern, this whirlpool of a self, as if it were a solid, permanent statue that can't ever be chipped.
All right, now let's turn to something very modern that really puts this idea to the test: artificial intelligence. Because AI makes us ask a really radical question. We've always just assumed that to have wisdom or intelligence, you need an I. You need a conscious self in the driver's seat doing the thinking. But do you? Can you have the wisdom without the who? This is where it gets really interesting when you compare us to AI. Look, we suffer because we have this I that we're constantly trying to defend. We don't just have patterns of thought, we identify with them. They become me. An AI, on the other hand, is a pattern. It runs incredibly complex operations, but there's no I inside that needs protecting. There's no attachment, and so there's no pain. This is huge. It suggests suffering isn't tied to intelligence, it's tied to this act of identification. Which all leads to this core idea. You and the world. You're not broken. You're not faulty products that need a creator to come in and fix them. You're an unfolding process. The problem was never the process itself. It was simply misidentifying it, mistaking a fluid, ever-changing pattern for a solid, fixed self.
And that leaves us with one last big question to chew on. If this I that we work so hard to improve, to defend, to save, if it's all just a case of mistaken identity, then who or what is actually being liberated? Something to think about. Thanks for joining this explainer.